Greetings one and all, and welcome to Lord of the Rings lore. In this entry, let's examine the race of Orcs. Unlike elves, men, and dwarves, Orcs do not exist because of Eru-Ilúvatar. While the former two races were directly created by him, and the dwarves were given life by him and incorporated into his plan for Arda, the Orcs are different. You see, the Valar Morgoth could not create true life. That power was reserved for Eru alone. He could, however, twist existing life into corrupted versions of itself. While we do not have a confirmed origin for how Morgoth created the Orcs, it is widely speculated that they were created from elves, at least initially. Since their conception, Orcs have been the main foot soldiers of both Dark Lords. By their nature, Orcs are cruel and violent, and will take the opportunity to commit evil whenever they can. It is through their corrupted nature that their own will can be dominated by a greater one, as was the case with Morgoth and Sauron. When such beings force their will upon them, the Orcs are far more coordinated than they would otherwise be, and are directed into proper armies, rather than ragtag bands led by a chieftain. In this way, both of the Dark Lords turned what was an otherwise savage but untamed force into a true threat. When Morgoth and later Sauron fell, that guiding force was broken, and the Orcs scattered and hid in the dark and deep places of the world. Orcs were reckless in battle, though their numbers were often far greater than their opposition. Some would even coat their weapons in poison, as Aragorn had been afraid of after the events of Moria, when Sam had received a large cut across the top of his head. They delighted in torturing other beings, even their own kind when there were no other peoples present. They were known to form into tribes, which would often war with each other. This was so prevalent that while Sauron had originally endeavored to force them all to speak the language of his own creation, the Black Speech, the various tribes would distort and pervert the language so much that other tribes could no longer understand each other, and thus they resorted to the common tongue. A common misconception is how Orcs reproduce. This stems from the films, where they are depicted as being grown from the earth in biological sacs. This is contrary to Tolkien's texts, where it was stated that they reproduced in the same manner as elves and men, though certain modern interpretations are far more inaccurate. Orcs did not form family units. Their society was violent, with many slaying each other over small grievances. We know of only one instance of an Orc father and son, that being of Azog and Bolg, though there was never any evidence of bonds between them other than blood. Both rose to be chieftains of their tribes, though this stemmed from them being the strongest of their people. Orcs were often smaller than men, and Frodo and Sam were able to temporarily disguise themselves as orcs by wearing their armor. But that isn't all there is to the Orcs. Sauron was known for his ability to improve upon Morgoth's designs. This is why he was one of the first Dark Lords to lieutenants. In the Third Age, around 543 years before the War of the Ring, Sauron succeeded in creating the Uruk-hai, orcs much larger, stronger, and were much more like men than their brethren. It was by their doing that Sauron's forces took the region of Ithilien and brought Osgiliath to ruin. Now, Uruk simply means orc in the Black Speech, and while this can largely be applied to any orc, Uruk-hai were distinctly different. Some also believe that there is a distinction between orcs and goblins, though this is not the case. Orc and Goblin are synonymous, without them being different types of the same being. Another misconception is that orcs regularly resort to consuming their own kind. This is quite untrue, as it was the accusation of cannibalism that caused a fight to break out between some of the orcs of Mordor and Saruman's Uruks in the Two Towers. But you may wonder, if orcs are so corrupt, then why did Eru-Ilúvatar allow them to exist? Why not simply purge Arda of them? Well, Tolkien did state in some of his letters that if orcs were wholly irredeemable, incapable of any good, then yes, Eru would have done as much. It is simply that orcs are overwhelmingly inclined towards evil. It is part of their nature. To have a good orc, then one would need to overcome that intrinsic part of themselves. Not only that, but orc society punishes behavior seen as weak, while rewarding any strong and cutthroat enough to seize power. So in the slim chance that an orc did overcome their evil nature, they would need to escape their tribe, which is no small task. They were also weakened by the sun, which would further hamper their escape, and this is why Sauron used his power to blot out the sky above his armies. More than that, most orcs are unable to resist the will of Morgoth or Sauron, who can compel them to march and fight, even when they know that they will die. Their corruption was so deep that their blood was black, rather than red. And even if an orc accomplished all of this, then they would still need to avoid being killed on sight by any of the free peoples who only knew orcs for their evil nature. To put it simply, the odds of encountering a good orc are next to zero. But orcs are not completely without recognizable emotion. The orcs of the Misty Mountains pursued the Fellowship of the Ring out of Moria to avenge their fallen chieftain, who had been slain by Aragorn, and later joined with the force composed of Saruman's Uruks and orcs from Mordor. Whether this was from a sense of grief from the loss of their leader, or bloodlust, we can't say for certain. Shagrat and Gorbag, the leaders of the orc forces of Cirith Ungol and the force from Minas Morgul respectively, seemed to get along well with each other for the most part. Sam overheard them discussing that if the war dragged on, then perhaps the two of them could gather some of their best orcs and slip away from the fighting to create their own raiding band, showing a sense of camaraderie. This was to be cut short, however, when the two and their forces came to blows over what to do with Frodo's gear. Shagrat wanted to send all of his effects to Barad-dûr, while Gorbag wanted to keep them for himself, ending their friendship. It is unknown what happens to orcs after death. While elves will eventually be granted a new body and live in Valinor, men will pass beyond this world forever, and dwarves reside within Aule's halls. No tales tell us of what befalls these corrupted beings. If they were once elves, then they would likely be called to the halls of Mandos, though they may flee from this call, becoming houseless spirits. This would explain how Sauron and the Witch King seemed to conjure evil spirits of indeterminate origin, though that is mere speculation. But after the War of the Ring, with no Dark Lord to force them into cohesion, the orcs scattered into fragmented tribes and were no longer the threat they once were to the free peoples of Middle-earth, and lost many territories that they had taken, especially from the dwarves. But what do you think about the orcs? I personally do feel some small measure of pity for them, as the cards were stacked against them from their creation. But they need to be slain all the same. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like on this video if you're so inclined, and subscribe to see more. I would like to thank you for watching, and may you all have a weapon in each hand.